Welcome back to another episode of Hot Mess Espresso. So excited to bring you guys this episode, so let's just get into it. So, we have a fantastic guest today. I've been on her podcast, Connection Over Perfection, and we actually met on the new millennial version of LinkedIn, TikTok. She's a mother, artist, podcast host, therapeutic nutritionist, holistic badass, and all-around amazing human. Please welcome my dear friend, Amber McCrea. Hi, beautiful.
Hi, thank you so much.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, yeah, we met on TikTok.
Yes,
have
ma'am.
our just mutual little witchy, holistic things in common.
Yes.
And then I found out that you have a podcast. So I mean, I know what your podcast is about, but for those that don't know, what is Connection Over Perfection about?
Basically, it is everything about connection. We talk about holistic nutrition. We talk about mental health. I'm a huge advocate for emotionally focused therapy. We talk about herbs and food and connections to ourself and one another. I'm really big on helping people learn how to become more connected to themselves and one another and really creating safe connections.
Yeah, I love that. I love every episode that it makes me think more and gives me more to think about. Especially because some of us want to be super holistic and stuff like that, but feel like we don't have the energy. And I feel like a lot of the guests on your podcast help either like talk about it or like tips and tricks and stuff like that. It depends on, which episode, but I love the way that you find people that have managed to work with like mental health and the more holistic end of things for people like me that want to be more holistic but have zero idea really where to start or how to upgrade it and stuff like that. So I love that so much.
Thank you. One thing I try to do is baby step it. Sometimes it's so hard to figure out where to start, and it's all so much to do. So that's one thing I try to do is help people baby step it into it, because we're not all going to be perfect ever. So we're just trying to do the best that we can.
We're just trying our bestest over here. So what actually inspired you to become a therapeutic nutritionist?
Great question. So it was actually two different modalities that I work with. I do the holistic nutrition and then emotionally focused therapy. So for the holistic nutrition, it was really my love for nature and finding alternative medicines that kind of led me down that path, but what really dove me really deep into starting and using it in my business is that my son was having these headaches and stomach aches, and the doctors just chalked it up to him being a boy, and they couldn't really tell me anything. They couldn't help me. So along my journey, I found this test, a delayed food allergy test, that really gave me insight to another tool that I might be able to use to help my son. And in doing that, it did in fact help. We removed a lot of the foods that were so-called healthy by definition of nutrient density, but not for his body. And I had asked his doctor to give him this test, and they flat out told me they would not, that it cost too much money, and he would have to continue to get his blood drawn over and over because they wanted specific, like, do you think that he's allergic to green beans? And if so, we'll test him on that. And if that doesn't come back, then we'll test him on this, versus a full spectrum panel, which I thought was absolutely asinine. And I was like, I'm not having my baby boy get pricked all of the time when you could just run a full panel. It doesn't make sense. So once we figured out what was happening and we removed the foods, funny enough, his headaches and stomach aches went away. And I'm not saying that's a cure-all, be-all, but it was a huge tool in his healing journey. So that was the holistic nutrition side. And emotionally focused therapy. My daughter and my brother, within a 2-year span, this always gets me emotional. I almost lost them. Yeah, they did not want to be here anymore due to, trauma, depression. They just, however you want to label that, they just did not want to be here anymore. And so I was on a mission on how to reconnect with my daughter and my brother, and which led me down to a lot of different types of therapies and counselors and everything like that. Nothing really worked until I found emotionally focused therapy, and it really helped me build that bridge. And what I learned from that is that it's not my job to fix them. It's my job to just love them where they are. And once I did that, life changed. And it forever changed my life, their life, and now everybody that I come in contact with.
I love that. Yeah, I think what you just said with it's not your job to fix them, but just love on. That's so important, because I think a lot of, I know people around me just want to do something tangible to help. It doesn't work like that. Like, if I could have figured out how to fix this, I would have literally Bob the Buildered it myself. And it's like, can we fix this? No, the fuck we can't. So I think that's so important with what you just said. You can't fix it. You just have to love them through it the best you can. And I'm sure as a mom and as a sibling, that was the hardest thing you ever had to do, was to kind of sit back and not jump in with both feet trying to figure it out.
Yeah, definitely it was, because when I did that, it just disconnected us more.
Yeah, because as somebody that has struggled with that, the last thing we want is somebody to come in and be like, how can we fix it? How can we fix it? I don't know. And you wind up pushing people away. So I love that. I think if anybody takes anything from this episode, that is one of the top 3 things that I want them to take. You cannot fix it. You just have to love them. That is, whew, I have chills.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that I learned in this whole thing, is that's the core to what I do. Is I remember sitting in the counseling chair, and the counselor looked at me and she said, if you want to help your daughter, you won't send her here. You will come and you will sit in this chair, because there's nothing wrong with your daughter. It's just how you're reaching her.
I love that. If you're a parent out there and your kids are struggling, I think that's something that really needs to resonate. I really think it does. And it's just so important. I'm so glad you said that.
It was the most humbling thing I had ever had to experience as well, because you really forced me to deal with my own shit. It forced me to deal with how I communicate, what triggers me, because it wasn't about what was wrong with her. It was about how I was connecting with her, why I felt like I needed to fix her instead of just loving her where she was. And that came from my fear. And so I began to parent out of love versus fear. Which was a huge shift for me.
Yeah, I'm sure it was, and I'm guessing that it's okay. It's okay. I'm shocked I haven't cried on this podcast yet, honestly. So I'm assuming that things are not necessarily better with her headspace, but obviously you guys are pretty close from the sounds of it now.
Yeah, so, it's an ongoing journey, and that's the thing about this is that you feel like once you get through it and you build that bridge that it's all going to be great. That's not the way it works, is that we're going to be disconnected from time to time, but the difference is that I can give her space to not be okay.
Right.
And I can honor my own fear in that it triggers my little girl being abandoned. There's so much that goes into this, that the big difference is that when we disconnect now, I am able to just hold space for her and allow her to not be okay, and continue to be safe and validate her feelings, which is something is very hard as a parent to do, because we have our own feelings. And that's why it's so important that we have a safe person, because when I need my feelings validated, I will then go, to my husband afterwards and bawl my eyes out, and he will validate my little girl, but it gives me space to be able to validate her little girl.
Right. And that's so important. I want to point out that, like, the one thing I've noticed you've done when it comes to holding space is not necessarily repeat back what people just say, but you're giving, like, your spin on it and how you're interpreting, and you're saying, is that close? And I feel like that's so validating for a lot of people, because it's like you're not listening to respond, you're listening to truly hear. So when you're repeating things back, either verbatim or just like paraphrasing what somebody just said, I think that's so important when it comes to holding space for people, because then it's like, no, you actually heard what I was saying, especially because communication can break down so quickly, and how somebody interprets what somebody else said determines their answer. So I love the way that you kind of repeat back or paraphrase, just to make sure that you're actually understanding what they mean. And I think that's so important when we're just listening to people, whether it be a parent, a friend, a child, a sibling, stuff like that. So I just kind of want to point out, I love when you do that. I think it's super, super, super important.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It goes back to helping people feel seen and heard and validated. And I think in this world of Me Too and trying to fix it, most people just want to be heard and seen.
Exactly. Exactly. So kind of circling back, thank you for sharing that. I know that was probably tough. It doesn't matter how many times you repeat it or retell
Right.
it. It never gets easier. It never gets easier. So thank you for sharing that. And, thank you to your daughter for obviously probably giving you permission to be able to share that story.
Yes.
But to kind of circle back, I'm very interested in the holistic nutrition end of things, especially with how it can connect to mental health. And how much myth-wise do you kind of hear about gut health, and what's like one or two myths that just literally make you go like, oh my God, that's not correct? Like what's something that you feel like in your research and in your, your journey, what are a couple of things that you feel like you want to debunk when it comes to the gut health end of things when it comes to mental health?
That's a great question. And I think before I dive into that question, I kind of just want to give a little overview of why we hear about gut health and mental health and that connection, because I know it comes up so often in so many different things. So for those that don't really don't know or understand why it's always brought up, the gut is linked to mental health through what scientists like to call the gut-brain axis. And this connection exists because of the intricate communication between your gut and your brain. And that goes on some different levels. So the microbiome, your gut consists of trillions of tiny microorganisms that collectively are known as the gut microbiome. And these microbiomes play a huge role in breaking down food and producing various compounds. So some of these compounds can influence your brain chemistry. So that's one. They're neurotransmitters. Your microbiome can produce neurotransmitters, which are chemicals that transmit signals to your brain. So for example, they can produce serotonin. Fun fact that 95% of the body's serotonin is actually produced by the gut. So, which is one huge fact in why it's connected to mental health.
So you literally are what you eat.
Or you are what your body can absorb.
Ooh,
is what I like to say.
That is very true. Yeah, because everybody just absorbs things differently.
Yes, and that kind of goes into later what we talk about the gut and how it's individualized.
Right.
So your microbiome can produce serotonin, and a transmitter that regulates your mood, basically. When the gut microbiome is out of balance, it can lead to changes in those neurotransmitter levels, which affect your mental well-being.
Right.
So also the huge thing is the immune system. Our gut is, when your gut is unhealthy or inflamed, it can trigger an immune response that releases chemicals known as cytokines. And these cytokines can affect your brain and contribute to conditions like depression and anxiety. And cytokines are just small proteins that are important for cell signaling. And then the vagus nerve. This is huge because the vagus nerve is the long nerve that connects your gut to your brain. So it serves as a communication highway, basically, allowing, signals to travel to the two. And the connection enables the gut to send information to the brain, which influences the mood and emotions. So this is why it is so talked about with mental health and the gut, is because they are 100% connected.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Right. So back to the question is, one myth that I see and hear all the time is that there's one modality to fix your gut. I see even herbalists like, this protocol is going to fix your gut completely and you're going to be cured from it. Or, if you take this probiotic, then your gut is going to be healed. Or if you, eat sauerkraut or kombucha, then it has those beneficial bacteria, then it's going to be healed. So it's like this one size fits all type thing that I just don't believe is true. And so when I hear somebody saying that their product, this one modality is going to heal the gut, that's not true. It takes the whole body. It's
right.
Lots of different modalities.
Yeah, I've definitely seen some of those little drinky drinks that are like, this is gonna make you so much more patient and nice, and I'm like, no.
Obviously you don't know me.
Yeah, literally, like if I could have a juice that made me nicer, like, I'm generally a nice person, but but people be trying me sometimes, and the Lord is testing me, and I didn't study. So obviously with obviously knowing mental health and gut health are linked, I feel like you were saying, there's definitely more of a movement, especially now, to be kinder to ourselves nutritionally to combat mental health issues. And I guess you kind of talked about it with the myth, but what are you finding limitation wise in some of these theories, especially with like the theory that your gut, if you fix your gut, you'll fix you kind of thing? That's kind of the mentality. Like, we need to be kinder to ourselves nutritionally, but also like they're saying that like the gut fixes literally all. So what are some limitations with kind of that theory on the microbiome and the gut and all of that?
Yeah, I love that you brought this up because I think it's a really huge topic right now. And I think we just need to be really careful about that one size fits all type thing. And I also feel like it is kind of goes back to that Western medicine where we pinpoint and pick things out and we address one area versus addressing the whole person. And with anything else, especially mental health, it's the individual. Everybody is different. And so one of the limitations is that we all have different needs, different lifestyles, different nutrients that we are either lacking or too much of. And so when we put this blanket on it, we're really doing a disservice. So that's one of the reasons that I love using the delayed food allergy test or the food allergy sensitivity, is because if we're talking about the gut, knowing what foods are good for us is going to be a great start. But I don't see that talked about. Inflammation and making sure that our gut microbiome, if it's so important, why are we not starting with the foods that we're consuming every day and knowing what is good for us? So that's one of the limitations. Mental health, that again, we're trying to box people in. We have, well, I think that there is benefit from the DSM-5 and other things like that. I do think that it's boxing people in and not allowing us to actually look at the individual and seeing what they need as a whole person. It's more of just this standard, okay, this person has this, we're going to give them this and we're going to do this. Versus, Amber, what is your background? What is your mental health history? What is your attachment history? What are all of these things that make up you, so we can address those? So I think that that's huge. Having a safe place. This is not talked about, having either a safe person or a safe place. I just don't think is talked about, which plays a huge role in all of these things, in our mental health and in our gut. Because if we're just trying to take a probiotic, but we're not dealing with the other factors in our life, say such as our home situation or our marriage or our relationship with our parents or our work, you can take that probiotic all you want to, but if you're still producing the stress hormones, and you're still living in fight or flight and cortisol is pumping through your body all of the time, you're not going to be able to make up enough beneficial bacteria for what else is running havoc within your body. So those things, I believe. And then another huge one is that literal limitations on these tests, like I mentioned with my son, are not given by most doctors. So I run for the people that I work with, I run the food allergy test, and I run a GI map. And most those are not covered by insurance.
Right.
The ones, and so to be able to really get to the root cause, it sometimes can cost a lot of money for people that really can't afford it. Literally. And the tests that are given by Western medicine and doctors are slightly different. They're not as sensitive as other tests that you can get, so it can miss different things and different aspects and what's happening within your body. So access, finances, all of these things that are holding people back, and they feel like their hands are tied, because really, honestly, they are. If you don't have enough money to find a holistic doctor or to take the steps to get these tests on your own, you're kind of left into the hands of your doctor. And there are a lot of really good doctors out there. But yeah, there really are. But for the most part, if you don't know what's happening or how to address it, you just have to trust that your doctor is doing the right thing. And sometimes they just don't have the time or space or energy or information to be able to provide what you need individually, because they're very limited in what they can actually do, not because they don't want to, but because of the way that things are structured.
Yeah, that's actually what I was gonna add. I feel like a lot of doctors, I know, like my traditional doctors, they do appreciate the more holistic end of things, but they're limited. You can't get a referral to a holistic doctor like ever, and they're kind of limited by the different blood tests that they can do. I know I've had family that their thyroid levels were fine. They went to the holistic doctor, and the holistic doctor ran a different kind of blood test, and that's how they found thyroid issues. It explained so much for them, but they spent years in a traditional doctor's office trying to figure out what was going on, and unfortunately, their doctor was kind of limited.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because it was actually in my notes to bring up, is that the testing and the ranges can be very different. So like you were saying, the thyroid testing, right? So they can run the thyroid testing, and their range, from the research that I have found, is that the range for most Western doctors just keeps you from disease. So when you're here in this threshold and you're not in disease, you can be 1 point or whatever, and you're in disease now. And so if you're right before disease, they count that as you are Literally. Okay. And then when you step over, then you're in disease. Whereas functional ranges, They want you over here in the middle, far away from
Mm-hmm.
the range of disease, which is something that's not talked about either in comparison, and the differences in being able to run different tests or reading the tests
Yeah.
even slightly
Yep.
different.
Because, I mean, we're going through it with my husband right now. He has his traditional thyroid levels are elevated, but because they're not elevated to a point where he's on medication, they're just like, well, they're elevated, but we'll just monitor it. And I'm like, what? So now I'm kind of going down a
Right,
little bit of a rabbit hole
exactly.
of figuring out what foods. He hates all vegetables, so this is really fun. Um, he has to stay away from potatoes. I'm not fighting that fight. That kind of thing. So like the foods and stuff like that will, like, it's not going to cure his thyroid. Like, it runs in his family. But the fact that
Right.
they're just like, oh yeah, it's bad, but not bad enough to put on medication, but bad enough to not be in a normal range. Good luck. And it's so irritating because I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, well, we're signing you up for this holistic doctor in this area. Like, we're going to figure out like what exactly it is, yada, yada, yada. But it's just, I kind of feel bad for traditional doctors because they are so limited. They're like, well, until we can like put you on medication, we'll monitor it, I guess.
Yeah, and that's kind of the census, and why it is, I'm
Yeah.
sure, frustrating for them as well. But, kind of back to the gut is like this basis is a lot of people with thyroid
Yep.
issues have gut issues because it all stems from, it starts, a lot of it starts there. It's
Mhm.
not the cure all be all, but it is definitely, I would say, the breeding ground and the starting point for so
Yeah,
many
and to kind
different
of circle
things.
back a little bit with what you're saying, it's not the cure all be all because you can't untraumatize somebody. So it doesn't matter how much you
Right.
eat healthy and drink your kombucha. I will never. You can't untraumatize somebody. So I think a lot of it has to do with like environmental. Like, yeah, like I suffer from adrenal fatigue like crazy, and I can't unstress myself out. Like, my baseline is my baseline, so it's just doing what I can to kind of minimize the damage. But yeah, environmental kind of in my opinion, puts a lot of the gut fix kind of out of that control, that area of control.
Yeah, I think I hear you saying that your environment and what's going on around you plays a huge role, even almost more over what's happening in your gut, because if you don't have this under control, then your gut is never really
Yeah.
going to be in
And,
control.
and
Is that
this
close?
is a prime example of how she
Yeah.
like repeats things back to understand. So this is what I mean, and it's fan freaking tastic that she does this because it's just making sure that she's got all of her bases covered on what I just said. I love that about you.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Thank you very much.
yeah,
Um,
I just had like one more question, and it kind of like popped up, but what is
Yeah.
the delayed food allergy test? Because I have never heard of this.
I love this topic, and I won't talk about it for hours because we don't have hours. But it is an IgG test, which is the IgG antibody test. So it tests against your immune system, basically how these foods respond or react to your immune system. I have not found one Western medicine doctor that will give the IgG test. Okay. They will give an IgE test, which is more like the anaphylactic, which, like, if you eat nuts and your throat swells and you take a Benadryl and you're cool, right? So the half-life of that is like 24 hours, where the half-life of the IgG antibody is 28 days. Okay, so when people say that they don't have any allergies, it's because this is something that we're not talking about. The delayed food allergies. These symptoms can be, the list is immense. These are just a few. Let me just say, these are only a few of the responses. You could have fatigue, irritable, like bowel syndrome, IBS, constipation, bloating, the back and forth between diarrhea and constipation, dark circles under your eyes, Inflammation is huge. Itchy ears, eczema, psoriasis, chronic ear infections. The list just goes on, because what this does is when you consume foods that your body sees as a pathogen, it attacks it because it thinks that it's harming your body. And so your immune system is attacking this and not focused on healing your body. So this is why if you're consuming a lot of foods that your body sees as a pathogen, your immune system, you don't have any left to fight any other infection. And so this is why I don't know why more people aren't talking about this. And I have heard that some people do not agree with this test, because it's, again, it's not an end all be all. This isn't going to fix it. It's just a tool. I couple this with an elimination diet to release any false positives. What that means is we remove these foods that come back for a certain amount of time, because we want your body to feel what it feels like to actually feel good. Most of us don't even know what it feels like to feel good. And so when you bring these foods back into your diet, you can actually feel, hey, does this feel good or not? And the end all be all is how you feel at the end of the day, right? These are just tools that help you. And so this is one reason I absolutely love this test. It is 184 foods and herbs that runs against your immune system. It shows you, it takes out the guessing. An elimination diet on itself is so hard to do, because first of all, you don't know what to eliminate, right? You're shooting in the dark, basically. And when you eliminate it, if you don't eliminate it long enough and you introduce it back, it's not going to do anything. And if you don't eliminate all of the things, your body is still being attacked from other things that it's trying to fight off. So this is why I have a really hard time with telling people what foods to eat. I don't do that. I will say the structure of this food is really good, and in its natural form, this is nutritional, but I will not tell people what to eat, because I don't know what's good for your body. The same that I experienced with my son is that we were giving him all the healthy things, kale, almond milk. We were doing all the alternatives. Well, it comes to find out that he is sensitive to all of those things, right? So when people say that they're choosing healthy foods, I'm like, but is it healthy? Is it good for you?
Like, you would think kale and almond milk are fine, depending on how the almond milk is made.
Right.
That's crazy.
And it goes off like 3 different levels.
Oh, okay.
4 different levels. So like a no sensitivity, a low sensitivity, a moderate, and a high sensitivity. And it's actually one of the other things why I'm so passionate about it is because I suffered vertigo extremely bad. And I was taking ginger chews and honey and all of those things to combat the queasiness and all of that. And come to find out, I was highly sensitive to both ginger and honey, which was making me spiral deep into my vertigo symptoms. And when I stopped that, I very, very rarely get vertigo spouts unless my immune system is low from like stress or something like that.
That is interesting, and I'm glad you brought up all the healthy food end of it, because you all hear eat kale, eat this, eat that, and it may not work for you.
Right. And it just brings me back to that whole person and just really individualizing the protocols and how we work with people.
I mean, I literally wrote down, I took notes while you were talking, because I'm definitely looking into this just for myself, because, with all of my medical stuff, it would definitely be interesting to see what I'm eating. And I mean, granted, we live in the U.S. where pretty much nothing we eat is good for us because of all the crap they put in it. I said what I said.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
We just do what we
if
can
it's imported
here,
from another country, I'm gonna grab that versus something that's made in the U.S. I'm sorry, but there's a lot of ingredients that are illegal and banned in just about every developed country except for the U.S. And that's not something we're talking about enough.
Yes.
Don't even get me started on dyes. But
I agree. I was going to say we could talk about that
the
for
things,
hours.
I didn't realize that there's dyes in Tylenol. I literally was like, excuse me?
Yes, it's insane.
Like, I'm just trying to get rid of my headache. Like, what?
It's like white yogurt. There's red dye 30. I'm like, how does that even...
Like,
Wait,
it
what?
just makes zero sense that there's dyes and things that I'm just like, oh my God, just let it be a bland color. Call it a day. You know, but yeah, I could go on about dyes for hours. But yeah,
I'm sorry, red dye 40.
Look, red dye anything. There's like 8 of them. Like, red dye is the worst. You don't press the red button, you don't eat the red dye. So yeah,
exactly.
It's just gonna be, I'm very interested to eventually take this and see like what I'm sensitive to. And I'm gonna make my husband do it to see what he's sensitive to. You know, when we can, like, when we're not in the middle of buying a house and can afford such frivolous things. But yeah, this has been so eye-opening and so enlightening, and I'm so glad we connected. If I say so glad one more time, I'm going to scream, but I'm just very grateful that we connected and we're kind of, you know, alike souls on what we want out of life and things. And, you know, we both have the commune in the middle of nowhere dream in like 10 years. Like, give me some land, get me a double wide. I want all the animals. I don't want to see people.
Yes.
You know, so I want to live off the land as much as I can. I do want, you know, plumbing and cell service. But, you know, living off the land, like, I'm willing to be off the grid to a point.
Right. We still need to be able to do our podcast and work with people and things like that.
But yeah.
Yes.
So I think to wrap this up, it is time for the first ever rapid fire. So we are gonna this or that.
Okay.
Don't think about it too much. Just the first thing that comes to mind. There's only 5 of them, so it's not. It's a little like Family Feud, but you know, a little easier. But so in the spirit of it being, you know, spooky season, and we're both, you know, a little witchy, a little, you know, divine, whatever. And then I threw in, you know, like a basic bitch, this or that. So without further ado, pumpkin or apple?
Sounds good. Pumpkin.
Ooh. Full moon or new moon?
Full moon.
Oracle cards or tarot cards?
Oracle cards.
See, I'm very much a tarot card girl.
I'm new to that. So
yeah,
it's on my radar, but yeah.
It's a lot. Simmer pot or smoke cleanse?
Smoke cleanse.
Ooh. And then last but not least, Halloween or Christmas?
Ooh, Christmas.
Ooh. I did not see that one coming.
I love Christmas. I'm a sucker for Christmas. All the things magical. Give me all the lights, all the pretty bows, and I've loved Christmas since I was little.
Yeah, I like them both. I do love them both, but I'm definitely a Halloween year-round girl.
I do love Halloween, but Christmas was extremely huge in our household, and we just did so many connecting traditions. I think that plays into it. Like it was huge. Now that you mention it, I guess I really didn't make that correlation before. So I love that you asked this question.
Me too.
A lot of connecting traditions, gingerbread houses, going to see lights, the hot cocoa, coloring, Christmas movies, singing songs, baking cookies, like all of those things that my mom did a really, really great job in like instilling with my siblings and I, that I did carry over to my kids, and they both are very much love Christmas. Even though my daughter, I think it would be hard for her to choose between Halloween and Christmas, but I think ultimately she would choose Christmas as well.
Well, thank you so much for taking out the time and coming on. I have loved talking to you. I mean, I always love talking to you, but I have loved talking about all this. This has been very eye-opening.
Yeah, thank you so much. I absolutely love this platform that you've created and everything that you're talking about here. Like you said, we just connected and we vibe on that same frequency. And so you're doing amazing things. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you. So yeah, you can catch Amber over on her podcast, Connection Over Perfection. And you can find that where? Spotify?
Spotify and I think all major platforms.
Perfect. Yeah. I will link her socials, her podcast link, all of that in the description on this podcast and also on the Instagram post and all of that. So you'll be able to very easily find her. Amber, it was so good to see you.
Thank you. You too, sweetheart.